All right, meantime, in the race for U.S. Senate, it's Congressman Jim Banks headed to the Senate to replace Mike Braun as he defeats Democrat Valerie McRae. And with Senate control now in Republican hands, I spoke with Senator-elect Banks on Friday. He joins us now here in our studio. Thanks so much for being with us. Congratulations.
Good to be here. Thank you very much.
So you'll now be a part of this new Senate majority, and you may end up with a trifecta in D.C. with President Trump's win on Tuesday night. What are the legislative priorities at the top of your list for this new Congress?
Well, Tuesday night was a mandate, and it's a mandate that means that we have to get the economy working for working people again. Working class Americans, people who go to jobs every day, who make an hourly wage, and then they go to the grocery store and they're spending twice as much on groceries, twice as much to fill up their tank of gas than what they were just a short time ago when Donald Trump was president before. So the agenda, as far as I'm concerned, the agenda is very simple. It's just going back to the Trump policies that we had for 4 years on his watch. And that starts with an executive order. I expect that it'll probably be the very first executive order when Donald Trump is inaugurated on January 20th and rides down Pennsylvania Avenue and walks into the Oval Office. There will be a stack of executive orders, and the first one will be the Remain in Mexico policy. I expect that to be the case.
Do you think we'll see mass deportations, and will that be practical?
Mass deportations likely would be more of a longer-term legislative issue, but the Congress will be backing the president up to make that happen. But to secure the border, absolutely. And that's what the American people expect of us. I think the results on Tuesday prove it.
Will we see a repeal of the Affordable Care Act? Is that something you'd support? And if so, what's the plan to replace it?
Healthcare is broken. There's no doubt about it. Higher healthcare costs. I think there are many ways that we can address it legislatively, but by cracking down on hospital and healthcare monopolies, creating more competition in the healthcare marketplace. That's more of a legislative issue, but there's a big difference between 2016 and 2024, and it's that Congress is more aligned with the Trump agenda to secure the border and the America First economic agenda to put our workers first. Some of that will be done by executive order, but then the Congress will back the president up. And I expect that when the dust settles, we will have a majority in the House, and the majority in the Senate is growing by the day, 53 with Pennsylvania, maybe 54 with Arizona. That gives us a lot of wind at our back to do what we have to do to back up the president to make it happen.
So speaking of backing up the president, speaking of the issue of health care, RFK Jr. seems poised to play a big role on that issue. And as a senator, you'd be tasked with confirming the president's cabinet nominees. Would you have any qualms about confirming Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for a cabinet position dealing with health care, given some of his more extreme statements on things like childhood vaccinations through the years?
Yeah, I think he brings a lot to the table. I don't know what role it is that he will play or what the president has in mind for him. I don't know that that's a confirmed position or if he'll be an advisor in an advisory role, so I don't want to speculate, but he certainly brings a lot to the table. And I think one of the big issues on election night was these issues related to the vaccine mandates and everything that happened that came out of COVID, and many of those policies that have still lingered to this day. And overall, the message of making America healthy again. No doubt that there are lots of good ideas from the right and the left, from those like RFK and many conservative thinkers around the country, what we can do to make this country healthy again. And RFK brings a lot of feedback to the table.
Just today, though, President Trump's former Surgeon General Jerome Adams, who's from Indiana, wrote on social media how the U.S. ranks 34th in life expectancy and that the healthiest countries all have high trust in vaccines, and that most countries worse than the United States on that list have lower vaccination rates. He says you can't make America healthy again without vaccines. Who do you trust more on this issue, Dr. Adams or RFK Jr.?
Like I said, RFK Jr. and brings a lot to the table, a lot of ideas that he has, and the American people they voted in a big way, giving President Trump a mandate on a lot of issues. I think the big issue, though, is securing the border and making it possible for working families to make ends meet again in the economy. That's what the election was all about. Some of the issues like vaccine, those are legislative issues that we will debate. It doesn't matter who President Trump nominates to be the Secretary of Health or the Surgeon General. A lot of these issues will be debated in the Congress. I look forward to being a part of that debate.
We'll see how all of those debates play out. Congressman Banks, Senator-elect Jim Banks, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it. Meantime, in the race for Attorney General, incumbent Todd Rokita was victorious in his race against Democrat Destiny Wells.
We've earned the trust and the confidence the vast majority of the people, voters and taxpayers of the state. Make no mistake, this was a referendum on the work we've done over the last 4 years, and I look forward to continue to do it.
Rokita still facing some potential disciplinary probes still as he gets reelected. Coming up next, we're going to talk with our panel about the race for governor and what happens next as Mike Braun makes plans for his new administration. And later, Indiana voters react to this week's election results. You'll hear what they're telling us about their hopes and fears. Straight ahead.